Honourable Minister of State for Western Economic Diversification.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the motion in front of the House, as I read it, deals with the government to take action on creating a balanced economy, supporting the middle class, and encouraging manufacturing and small business job creation. In my opinion, I think in order to do that, we have to look at our country's ability to have financial stability, so strong social safety net, and including that our fiscal house is in order, because a lot of the dialogue on the economic downturn in 2008 came around debt ratios in government operating in certain countries. And you'll have to forgive my cold. So when you look at our government's track record on this, Mr. Speaker, and I wish I had an hour to talk about this, but I'll do what I can in 10 minutes. When it comes to that balanced economy component, first of all, when we came into office between 06 and 08, we aggressively paid down our government's debt. This meant that it was towards that desire to have a balanced budget and ensure that we do have that strong fiscal house in order. And when the economic downturn hit in 2008, we ensured that there was measures taken to bolster consumer confidence and to ensure job creation through targeted infrastructure spending like the Knowledge Infrastructure Program, the Community Infrastructure Improvement Program. Again, that these were designed to create jobs, but ensure too that they were designed in a way that we can move back towards balance once we were out of the economic downturn. And we were also trying to ensure that we had the situation that was right to create jobs. So we increased our trade agreements. We came into office, I believe the number, Mr. Speaker, was 6 trade agreements. We're now over 40. We've invested $50 billion in infrastructure through the Building Canada Plan, which is one of the largest infrastructure funding programs in Canadian history. We've also looked at ways to ensure that we have a strong, skilled labor pool, which I could speak to in detail. And then we also want to ensure that we have a healthy and educated population, which is why we've increased transfer payments to the provinces, Mr. Speaker. And we've ensured a stable source of funding for both healthcare and education so that our provincial partners can plan for those investments well into the future. Importantly, 2 other things. We've also made sure that we have lowered the tax rate on job-creating companies. Why have we done that? Because all else considered equal, taxation rates are certainly a determinant to assessing whether or not foreign investment can be attracted into a country. And we've also looked at ways to reduce our red tape burden, which I'll speak to in a moment. But most importantly, we've undergone strategic review in government. Through all of these other economic actions that I just talked about, we've built it so that we're increasing revenue to government, but we've also ensured that we're taking good care of our fiduciary responsibility to manage taxpayer dollars wisely, and we've made sure that we're on track to balance our budgets, which we continue to do so in this fiscal year. So all in all, with all of this economic plan that we've put in place, the ground is fertile to ensure that Canada's long-term success in the economy is there. So that's the balanced economy macro picture. The conditions are right to create jobs and ensure that we have entrepreneurship, et cetera, in Canada. Again, it's been through years and years of this government's strong, stable, steadfast focus on smart and predictable economic policy. In terms of support for the middle class, Mr. Speaker, look, the tax burden in Canada is at its lowest rate in 50 years. And when you look at the tax relief and benefits that an average 2-earner family of 4 will accrue historically since 2006, and with our new measures, Mr. Speaker, that means an additional $6,600 in the pockets of Canadian families per year. That is not insubstantial. That means a lot to Canadian families. And when you look at where we're trying to target, ensuring that Canadian families have choice in how they're spending money, more income flexibility, that tax reduction means a lot to Canadians. And again, through our economic action plan, we've seen one of the best job creation records in the G7, which means that there's more job availability for Canadians, for Canadian families. Again, looking at that middle class piece, Mr. Speaker. But as the Minister of State for Western Economic Diversification, I wanted to speak a little bit about my portfolio and looking at I don't think that the debate is, well, you know, we can't support the energy sector and have a stable Canadian economy. I think it's actually saying, look, we've got some very strong primary industries in Canada, certainly in Western Canada. The energy sector is part of that, as is agriculture, as is forestry. But the strength of those industries, those primary industries, can be used to create receptor capacity for emerging secondary industries. And whenever I address a Chamber of Commerce in Western Canada, I always talk about the fact that, you know, in my position, I want Canada to see Canadians to see Western Canada as more than hewers of wood and drawers of water, Mr. Speaker, because while those industries are so important, they create hundreds of thousands of jobs, they will continue to be important for the economy. There's stories that can be told about the emergence of digital media clusters, of biomedical technologies, of the pharmaceutical sector, of the burgeoning field of clean energy technology, of our aerospace sector in Western Canada. And it's been through our government's targeted measures to support these particular areas, many of which are small businesses, that we've seen them start to grow and thrive. So with regard to small business support in general, Mr. Speaker, I want to explain our policy on taxation rates for job-creating companies. I'm first going to read a quote from a debate in February 2011 by my colleague from Hamilton Mountain, who I have a great respect for. She's a very talented parliamentarian, but I do disagree with her on this point. She rose in debate on a Liberal motion and said, "I'm delighted to raise in the House to speak to the Liberal motion calling on the government not to proceed with further corporate tax cuts and to restore the tax rate for large corporations to 2010 levels in the upcoming budget." She continues on to talk about why we shouldn't be lowering tax rates on job-creating companies, Mr. Speaker. If you're in a company, a lower taxation rate gives you the ability to have liquidity, you have more choices. So this is why, and again, it attracts that foreign direct investment. That's why we've reduced the corporate tax rate to very competitive levels internationally. On the small business side, we increased the threshold, Mr. Speaker, of taxation rates for the lower tax rate for small, medium-sized enterprise to $500,000 so that more businesses would classify for that particular rate. And again, we actually reduced the rate. And Mr. Speaker, I do believe that my colleagues opposite voted against those motions. So I find it somewhat rich that they're putting this forward today, because it's been our government that's been consistently putting forward both messaging and tangible policy to show our commitment to small businesses. But small businesses can be supported in many ways, Mr. Speaker, above and beyond these tax breaks that we've already done. And through Western economic diversification, we support a wide variety of measures to support small businesses. We support the Western Canadian Business Services Network, which includes organizations such as Alberta Women's Entrepreneurship, which, and a shout out to them, a great organization. We have the Community Futures organizations, which provide small business loans to small businesses in rural communities, Mr. Speaker, to see economic diversification. We've also invested across the R&D life cycle for innovation. And Mr. Speaker, to say that we don't have an innovation tax credit is simply ridiculous because of the SR and ED tax program, Mr. Speaker. My concern with the NDP's motion is that there's absolutely no detail on what this would be spent on. They haven't tried to define innovative activities, what areas they would focus on. And I believe that through the Jenkins report and the work that we've done, Mr. Speaker, we've done a very good job to support basic research. We've supported commercialization activities as well as tax credits for innovation happening in companies. In my department, we have the Western Innovation Initiative, which is a new program, $100 million over 5 years, targeted to provide support for small businesses who are looking at prototype development, process scale-up, these sorts of things. This has been an awesome program. We've seen huge subscription rates for it. And again, it's in an area in the R&D life cycle that we could talk about every step of the way that our government supported, including the Venture Capital Action Plan, Mr. Speaker. I guess what I want to close with is something that my colleague was alluding to, is that when we're looking at corporate tax rates, we can't just look at tax cuts. We also have to look at other taxation rates. And what my concern is, Mr. Speaker, is the NDP has never come out and said we will not impose a carbon tax on Canadian businesses. I know there's usually a giggle on the other side when this is brought up, but a carbon tax would, in fact, raise the cost of input costs like electricity, like consumable goods and manufacturing, that I do not think my colleagues opposite have adequately modeled. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, if I was a small business, I would be concerned about the inability of the NDP to put forward a predictable and stable plan when it comes to taxation rates. This is what our government has done. We have said, here's what we're going to do to help you, and we've followed through with that, Mr. Speaker. So I thank you very much for the time today and to be able to talk about our government's track record in this area.